Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to explore a really fascinating and deeply moving story called Gaslight and the Foreign Classics Film Club. It's one of those narratives that perfectly captures just how confusing our own realities can get and how finding the right vocabulary and, honestly, the right person can change absolutely everything. We'll be looking at two university students whose lives collide in the dark of a movie theater, only to face some pretty harsh truths out under the street lamps. So, have you ever felt like you were starring in a movie where everyone else knew the script, but you were just completely left in the dark? It's a heavy feeling, right? That unsettling sensation that things just aren't right, that you're being watched or treated differently, but everyone around you insists everything is perfectly normal? Well, this is exactly the reality for our protagonist, Mark. He's a young, Black university student studying math and physics, navigating a massive campus of 20,000 students, where he is one of only a couple dozen Black students. He constantly feels this unspoken pressure, this sense of being monitored that he just can't shake. It literally makes him feel like he's trapped in a confusing, unwritten script. Looking for an escape from all that pressure, Mark joins the Foreign Classics Film Club, and that's where he meets Blanche. They are such a fascinating contrast. On one side, we have Mark, quiet, calculating, hyper-aware of his bargain basement clothes, especially those vintage Oxfords, and really just hoping to go unnoticed. On the other side is Blanche. She is this outgoing film buff, incredibly observant, and totally unbothered by her own threadbare coat or what anyone thinks of her appearance. But despite those differences, they bond almost instantly. They're both scholarship students working tirelessly to escape deep poverty. Basically, they're two outsiders who find comfort in each other and a shared love for amateur cinema analysis. Now, before we get into the heavier stuff, I have to ask you this fun fact question from the story because it says so much about Mark's character. As Mark and Blanche start spending time together, sharing an armrest at the movies, grabbing coffee, Mark is incredibly nervous. He had a really tough time in high school, so he's constantly worried about being awkward, analyzing his body language, and terrified of saying the wrong thing. So what do you think is his secret trick for keeping his cool while sitting next to the enchanting Blanche? Now, what's really interesting here is that to disperse his physical anxiety, Mark literally sits in the dark movie theater solving first-order differential equations in his head. I mean, it's such a brilliant little detail. While Blanche is completely absorbed in the cinematography of some German classic, Mark is doing complex particle physics calculations just to keep his heart rate down, all so he can eventually have a completely normal conversation with her afterward. And speaking of those conversations, let's talk about the word banal. It means boring, ordinary, or lacking original ideas. When Blanche first approached Mark to ask his opinion on a Kurosawa film, Mark was terrified that his answer was going to be completely banal. He just assumed he was this awkward guy with nothing interesting to say. But the beauty of their connection is that Blanche saw right past his anxiety. She actually valued his insights. And as she listened, she gave him the confidence to stop worrying if his thoughts were too banal and to really start sharing his true perspective. As they get closer, their conversations shift from cinema to their real lives. And this brings us to the idea of being inclusive. In the story, Mark and Blanche talk about the university's orientation brochures. These brochures feature highly diverse, perfectly inclusive images, showing at least 3 races in every single photo. But there is a massive contrast between these progressive marketing materials and their actual environment. Blanche points out that their professors are almost entirely white and male. And Mark notes that while the imagery is inclusive, his actual lived experience as a Black student, dealing with subtle, constant mind games on campus, feels very, very different. It's an uphill battle, and they both know it. Section 1. The meaning of gaslight. Everything takes a turn mid-semester when the club screens a 1940 British movie called Gaslight. This film is huge because it finally gives Mark the exact vocabulary he needs to explain his reality to Blanche and honestly to himself. Mark's analysis of the film is just profound. In the movie, a husband is secretly searching for hidden rubies in the attic, which causes the gas lamps in the house to dim. But whenever his wife points out the flickering lights, the husband denies it. He tells her she's just imagining things. He deliberately manipulates the environment and then makes her doubt her own senses and question her sanity. Mark watches this and it hits him. This is exactly what is happening to him in real life. And this brilliantly illustrates the core concept of gaslighting. It's the act of manipulating someone into doubting their own perceptions, memories, or sanity. Mark explains to Blanche that, sure, he hasn't been looking for hidden rubies, but he has absolutely lived the reality of being gaslit. He constantly feels watched and targeted by the town police, but society, and the authorities themselves, imply that he's just overreacting or being paranoid. He is constantly being told his reality simply isn't real. Section 2. A reality of harassment. Let's move to the streets and see how this builds over time. Mark decides he needs to let Blanche see exactly what he means. In week 1, right after they discuss the movie, Mark spots a police cruiser driving by. He casually suggests an evasive detour through a park to avoid them, though he doesn't tell Blanche why. Then, in week 2, Cruiser 1025 is parked right outside Blanche's residence. Mark finally confesses he's being followed. Blanche is a bit skeptical at first. She wonders why anyone would follow them, which really highlights how hard it is to see someone else's invisible burden. All of this sets the stage for week 3, where the cruiser pulls up right beside them, forcing a direct, unavoidable confrontation. During that conversation in week 2, Mark explains a systemic practice to Blanche known as carding. Carding is when police stop people, demand their information, and record it, even when absolutely no crime has been committed. He explains to Blanche that it's the implied suspicion of this practice that feels exactly like gaslighting. The authorities say they're just keeping the community safe, but the constant, targeted surveillance makes Mark feel like a suspect just for existing. It forces him to constantly second-guess his own actions. Section 3. Standing up as an ally. So we arrive at week 3. Cruiser 1025 pulls up right beside them, and the illusion is completely shattered. Blanche finally witnesses the police tailing them firsthand. And unlike the wife in the movie who stays quiet, Blanche does not hold back. She spins around, knocks on the cruiser window, and fearlessly confronts the 2 officers. She tells them, "You guys followed us last week, and now you're following us this week. In my books, that's harassment." She even leverages her position on the student council, threatening to make it a campus-wide issue. Her voice is totally unyielding. In that intense moment under the street lamp, Blanche completely validates Mark's reality. She proves to him that the flickering lights are real and he is not crazy. Blanche calls it exactly what it is: harassment. It's unwanted behavior that makes someone feel annoyed, upset, or scared. By vocalizing this, by defining the officer's actions as harassment right to their faces, Blanche completely strips away the gaslighting. The officers try to deflect, of course, claiming they are just doing a regular patrol to keep students safe and protected, mimicking the exact manipulative language Mark had described earlier. But it doesn't work anymore. The truth is finally out in the open. So, the crucial point here is the concept of an ally. An ally is a person who helps and supports someone else, especially when they are facing unfair treatment. After years of loneliness, of feeling totally singled out and doubting himself, Mark finally has a true ally. When Blanche stands up for him, the emotional relief he feels is just profound. They share this embrace that seems to wash away years of isolation. He realizes in that moment that having someone truly see and defend his reality changes absolutely everything. Section 4. The moral of the story. As we step back from Mark and Blanche's journey, there are 2 massive takeaways we can draw from this explainer. First, the absolute importance of an ally. Mark felt entirely alone until Blanche witnessed the truth and stood firmly by his side. Having someone believe your experience is a total game changer. Second, you have to trust your reality. Just like we saw in the film Gaslight, people or systems will often try to convince you that what you are experiencing isn't real. This story is a powerful reminder to acknowledge the truth of our lived experiences, even when it's incredibly difficult or when others are trying their hardest to deny it. To wrap things up, I want to leave you with this final, provocative question to think about. How can you be a better ally to someone whose reality is being questioned? Think about Blanche. She listened, she learned the vocabulary, she observed, and when the moment came, she used her voice. We all have the power to stop the gaslighting in someone else's life simply by seeing them, believing them, and standing with them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you